It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Whoa, that was not a great Feedback Friday song. I was all over the map for that. Question right off the bat for you guys on Feedback Friday. Do I look overlit right now to you? I have beefed up the lighting because I thought in the first couple of videos it looked a little like this kind of grayed out. The colors weren't punching as much. I thought that adding more backlight actually meant I needed to add more forelight. I know this is overlit. I know this, but does this look overlit to anybody? Because I can't tell, because I am very pale naturally. So if this doesn't bother anybody, I'm going to keep this lighting because it seems to work in both daytime and nighttime. Thank God. Please let me know. Also, right off the bat, so I don't forget, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. The most crap I got this week for pointing out to people that they asked for an alternate method of payment. I said, hey, here's PayPal, you can do it that way. And then they complained about that. And I'm like, guys, they got mad at me for that. Big political diatribe. These are the only two ongoing payment options that I have. People were saying I should get a P.O. box or use cryptocurrency. Do you know how much one Bitcoin costs? Like, are you seriously going to give me that much money? If you're going to, maybe I should. But cryptocurrency, seriously, for goofy YouTube videos? And a P.O. box number, a little too easy to track because P.O. box numbers tend to be close to someone's house. Bad security. The only other thing you can do, and this is the only other thing, I do a Kickstarter periodically. In the spring, we're doing Boss Fight. You better be there. Because if you somehow got a problem with Kickstarter for some reason, sorry guys, we're going to have to agree to disagree. You are looking for stuff. There is never going to be a perfect option. The idea that people would mail money to a P.O. box, seriously? Do people actually do that? Maybe I'm just not aware, but this seems to be like old sci-fi convention methods of payment. I mean, that was the last time I used a P.O. box was for that. That, just so you guys know, costs money. So if I'm not bringing in more than the P.O. box costs, it doesn't make any sense. You got to be reasonable with this stuff. But let's move on to the actual comments about the content of the videos this week. That was on the culture of victims. Just so you guys know, YouTube has been messing hard with my monetization lately. The culture of victims video got auto flagged. I had to appeal it, but they just overturned the demonetization yesterday. So guess who lost out on the bulk of the monetization for that video? Thanks, YouTube. This is why things like Patreon are super helpful. And then when I was reading the comments, I noticed that they demonetized my video on Women's March Inc. And I was like, WTF. Women's March Inc. is a corporate entity. Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour and company are public figures. It should be completely fair to criticize them based on their individual behavior. This has nothing to do with all women or anything like that. And that wasn't an auto flag. That was fine up until a couple days ago. So, it's so frustrating, which is why I don't want to rely on YouTube ads. Like a toilet seat, up and down, up and down, up and down, depending on what they decide to demonetize. Because by the time you successfully fight it, the bulk of the traffic you're going to get for a video is gone. It's a really lousy system. So enough with my frustration. Let's get on to your comments. Where's the Women's March video? I should actually start there because that was the first one. Somebody said they didn't like the term dog whistle and they were really cool about it. So I want to give credit where credit's due. They did say they guess that it has proper uses, but it's been misused I'm just going to read it. I agree with most of this, though. I really don't like the term dog whistle. I guess it has proper uses, but it has been misused to play the guilty by association game once too many times. I think Sarsour and the gang aren't doing any dog whistling. They're just blatantly bigoted, but that's my view. I still agree with the essence of what you're saying. And then other people said, no, here's the dog whistle. And I just want to empathize with the fact that the term, there are a lot of perfectly good terms that have been weaponized and used in inappropriate places. Just so you guys know, ironically, one of the terms that has been misused is gaslighting. But this misuse of terms is a form of gaslighting, and that's what's so insidious about this. I have seen a lot of dog whistling with the Gillette ad as well. More on that later. But I just want to say I sympathize with the discomfort in some of these terms. The problem is there are no really alternative terms for the same phenomenon. And by what I'm talking about, it's that most people will, if you're not the intended audience, you'll hear a completely innocent message. Either the people who are intended to be victimized by the terminology, they get upset and then nobody understands why they're upset, effective dog whistle, or it's code to a particular group that people want to mobilize while seeming innocent to everybody else, talking about, for instance, nationalism instead of white supremacy. That was a dog whistle until the goalposts moved to be white nationalism, which we all sort of know is essentially the same thing. But for years, people who talked about nationalism, which has always, even going back to the time of George Orwell, has been somewhat insidious. George Orwell himself linked nationalism to anti-Semitism. Totally worth a read. His essay on anti-Semitism talks about how nationalism comes into play with that. Orwell was so brilliant in ways that a lot of people don't really recognize. But I am getting distracted by my love of George Orwell. Let's move on to the 5 Ways to Stop the Culture of Victims. This went over a lot better than I expected. The whole week went over a lot better than expected. Yay. It's nice to hit the bullseye on 3 contentious things and have over like 90% positive feedback on well-watched videos 3 times in a week. That so rarely happens. So yay. One person did make an interesting comment that I want to read. And I'm going to be very careful responding to this because it is tender ground. I really like this talk and I agree with most of it, a lot of it. I would like to add something from the masculine perspective, though. I love when people start this off. It's like I'm not taking issue, I'm just adding something. I love it when people do that because it contextualizes what they say next. I know it's not a criticism, they're just adding. Amazing intro. Thank you. Context is so important. As you said in reference to playing Thundercats, girls are who they are, boys are what they do. And there's certainly merit to being what you do rather than what you are, but there's also a darker side. You see, if you fail as a professional woman, you are still a woman. Your value is preserved in your womanhood. If you fail as a man, well, you're honestly just a burden. And they go on, they bring up the typical small talk thing. So what do you do? And in this person's case, they say, it's a question I often get. I don't really have a job. I've been through the whole job thing so many times and fallen off so many times. I'm starting for myself soon, so that's good, but I don't get paid yet. The looks you get as a man, if you are not a provider, are not employed, are dependent. I think you get this idea. This guy says, if a man doesn't make money, he's a burden, a failure, a reject, a mockery, less than human. If a woman doesn't make money, at least she's still a woman, a human being. I do want to add that there is actually a dark side to that dark side. Women have this weird thing in business, in professions, in politics as well. The more competent a man is, the more likable he is seen to be. The more competent and professionally higher up a woman is, the less likable she is seen to be. So this exact same thing that this male commenter is completely right about from the male perspective, women get the opposite. So it's not, and fortunately, maybe his wife has gotten more of it than he realizes, but maybe she's been one of the lucky ones who works in a good workplace where this isn't an issue. But I know I have had issues where if you are all the things you're supposed to be in business, assertive, decisive, and so on, you get labeled a bitch. And the problem is a lot of the things that you need to do to succeed in the business world are considered unfeminine. And some of this is changing, some of it isn't. That likability problem is this lingering thing that's the opposite side to this thing is very real, that men are extremely defined by their professions. And I don't like that. I really don't like that, because people are not just their jobs. I know a lot of people who, what they do for a living isn't just what they define. I know a lot of people who have day jobs, but they have hobbies that are more of their identity. They're just particular skills that it's not easy to make a living at. I have a lot of, most of my friends, I'm actually really, really blessed. Apologies to atheists. It's the only word I could think of at the time. To have friends, male and female alike, who are so interesting that they're not, I don't think of them as defined by their jobs. And maybe it's because of the, I know them through fandom or gaming or cosplay or something like that there's always an and in the way I know them. But they're really not just defined by their jobs. They are so much more interesting than that. And I'm so glad to know them in a multifaceted perspective. But I will say that I don't ask what do you do for a living anymore. I've altered the question in sensitivity to some stay-at-home dads I knew a few years ago. I say I knew a few years ago because they're not stay-at-home dads anymore. Their kids are at the point where they went back to work. But I say something like, so what do you do with yourself? How do you fill your days? Or, so what are you interested in? What are your, tell me something about yourself. If I do say, what do you do? I will often say, because everybody else talked about their job, I'll say, so what do you do? It doesn't have to be a job. And then obviously a reaction is super important, because I know I learned from talking to stay-at-home dads that there is this stigma against men who don't work. And that's just so damn stupid. I know it's real, but it's just so damn stupid. And you can tell I'm frustrated by this, because what your job is doesn't define you as a human being. And I know a lot of absolutely great people who are not where I think they should be through no fault of their own. It's often a health issue, or just they were born in the wrong place for their skills to be appreciated. They live out in Saskatoon or something like that. They don't have the money to relocate. They're really creative. They're really good at media, but they're not at a major media center. And they're not a person like me who just has a super thick skin, so I can just go on YouTube and get people, periodically angry at me, but not this week. Yes. And that, so I just wanted to give some support to that commenter, because they are absolutely right. Guys who are not defined by their jobs take a lot of shit, and it's not right. This is one of those things that I don't feel like there's been adequate trade-offs. As women enter the workforce, we have not been equally supportive of men who back away from the workforce for various reasons, including supporting the woman in their lives, which is something that women have done for eons. Men are just starting to recognize. I know this guy, I know him through the con scene, but he's the primary caregiver to, you'd never know their son is moderate functioning on the autism spectrum, but this kid's pretty profoundly autistic. And she was the higher income earner. She works longer hours. This gent happens to be a teacher, so he took point on raising his son. And I have so much respect for that, but I found out the hard way. I'm in a minority, and so he sort of has kind of quirks related to masculine identity. He swaggers and postures sometimes in a way that I give him more rope than other people, because I sort of recognize, yeah, he probably takes a lot of shit for being a dad first and everything else second. But let me tell you, I have so much friggin' respect for that. Not only because it's hard, just because society sucks that way, but because he made the smart choice for his family. And he has been, what a wonderful success story. Like I said, you wouldn't know, like, you talk to his son and you get the sense that there's something kind of there, but you know, when he told me the severity of his diagnosis and how much he's come along, I was like, wow, I never would have known the kid was only, you know, diagnosed as moderately functioning. I would have thought he was high functioning to, like, you know, what used to be called Asperger's syndrome. Great work. And I think that is just so strong. And like, that should be a paragon of masculinity. And the fact that we don't see that in conventional attitudes in society, like, I agree, something is just absolutely wrong, because I have nothing but respect for that. That is like Kratos dad level dadding, you know, parenting. Awesome. Right. Because then, you know, he kind of understands the fact that his wife comes home from work and she has a very stressful job, and she knows she doesn't want to hear all the, oh my God, this is what happened. You got to suck a lot of it up. And that takes a lot of internal fortitude. That is not easy. And I think we do need to support, people of all genders who decide to do that, which is also, because, you know, I hear from stay-at-home moms too, that they get crapped on by so-called feminists. And I'm like, isn't this whole equality thing supposed to be about choice and people making the right choices for them and their family, and not judging so hard and not slotting everybody into a single paradigm? And of course, that brings me to the Gillette ad. And there were 500 plus comments on this video, so I didn't read them all. I hope you understand. I went to look at it. I was like, 500. It was 514 at that point. I was like, 500. I was like, oh my God. So I read the first 50. I was like, oh my God. But it was like 92 point something % positive. So I was like, all right, I'll just take the top rated comments, because nobody got really upset about it. There were some questionable comments. I left them up because, like I said in the video, I recognize that this one is triggering. So I sort of relaxed my standards on this one, just because I have to. In situations like that, it is extremely, at least what I've been taught as a facilitator, it is extremely important that people have the ability to talk and speak without judgment, and that can help mitigate the damage that these things sometimes do. So I did sort of relax my codes of conduct in comments here, just so you guys know, just because I was prepared for people to have very strong reactions to the content with cause. With cause. There was some disagreement about whether those kids fighting were what? Oh shoot. I accidentally opened my PC monitoring thing on my video card. Whoops. That's what that noise was. The whole thing about the two kids, some people saw that as just okay roughhousing. I didn't. And what the dialogue that ensued in the comments was very interesting, because Some guys actually said they hated roughhousing and play fighting as a kid. And they didn't like the fact that they felt forced to do it because that's what boys do. And that's what boys will be boys meant to them. And I completely agree. Like I said, maybe I live in a bit of a bubble. Because I'm not going to go as to why I live in a bubble, but I know that the parents I'm around are extremely, they are extremely aware that there is a difference between boisterous play and physical bullying. And having been there, having been in groups, especially of boys, I remember my friends had a How to Train Your Dragon party for, I think their son was 8 at the time. And there were periods where like the boys would just like, whoop, tackle each other. And you knew just by the sounds, there is a difference between a cry of having fun, a cry of surprise, and then a cry of this kid actually got hurt. And there have been some issues. I remember there was one issue where a kid all of a sudden started biting other kids. This apparently happens sometimes. It's something that some parents have to contend with. But this kid would just start biting other kids. And it took a while, but eventually the kid sort of phased out of it. They had to do some pretty extreme parenting for a while. But man, that stuck, because that was nothing in the home. Just apparently some kids get bitey. I mean, I have a cat that gets bitey. That's what I kind of compared it to. Some cats are like Chomp, and you have to like not let them get away with that. You shouldn't, I have learned that you shouldn't compare your pet parenting skills to kid parenting skills, but it's my point of reference, so I have to think it, not say it. But yeah, there's a difference. There's a difference between roughhousing and actually hurting someone. And one of the things about developing empathy is having kids recognize that there's a difference. I mean, God, I talked about playing Thundercats. My friend Vera Horseman and I used to beat the ever-loving snot out of each other playing Thundercats and playing He-Man and playing... There's a while there where it was like Battle My Little Ponies. I don't even know where this game came from. It was an excuse to run around, I guess. But we were like My Little Ponies, but we all had like superpowers. And there was a lot of fighting. It was Voltron, and this was action-driven shows. We roughhoused. There was this game when I was in school called Red Rover. You cannot play this game in school anymore because you linked arms and it was Red Rover, we call so-and-so over, and you ran as fast as you could and tried to break the human chain, or you had to join the other team. And the team that the team that absorbed the other team was the one that won. And man, there were a couple of big kids, like, overweight kids. This was the first time. It was the only time in the history of any physical activity that overweight kids got picked first for a team, because everybody wanted the big kid, because everybody just let him through. It was an equalizer. But as I was getting into high school, they were actually banning this game in local elementary schools because wrists got sprained, fingers got dislocated, a shoulder got dislocated, elbows got... It was an unsafe game. But this is how I came up. We had a game we called Red Ass. It was, those... I don't know if they even have them anymore, because they freaking hurt when you get hit. But they're like a dense rubber ball that really bounces like crazy, right? But you throw it against the wall, and you've got 6 bounces to catch it. REDASS. You got to catch the ball before the 6th bounce. If you don't, you get a letter. So you have 6 attempts to catch the ball within 6 bounces. And if you lose, if you fail out, like if you get red ass, you have to stand against the wall, and the other kids could whip the ball as hard at your butt as they possibly could. This is what passed for fun at Jane and Finch. Even things like hopscotch and double dutch skip rope were freaking hardcore. It was full contact hopscotch, man. Like, tetherball. I don't know if they got rid of a lot of these because kids were getting, when the ball was at the top and it went around in a circle like a maypole and you hit it and then you hit these are the games we used to play. We survived elementary school somehow with these games. But they were very physical. That's what I consider roughhousing. Knocking a kid over and like hitting him on top of them, that isn't roughhousing. That is bullying. That is physical assault. You don't do that. Now, granted, red ass was a form of physical assault, but it was kind of consensual in its own way. Like, you knew what the rules of the game were before you played. So I think this just goes to show that I am no shrinking violet. I was a pretty rough and tumble kid. I've got the dislocated fingers to prove it. I have 3 out of my 10 fingers, if you include thumbs as fingers, are bent in some way because they all got dislocated when I was a kid. And I remember the one when I dislocated, I think it was this finger. It was one of the ring fingers playing. Oh no, it was this one. It was this ring finger playing basketball, 4th grade. And the basketball hoop was one of those poles that came up. And okay, in fairness, we were guarding under the key. It was hardcore, like hood ball. We guarded under the keel. But I remember coming around to try to block a layup. And the way I came around, none of this was regulation, so it wasn't built properly out. It was like the pole went up and there was a basketball hoop. So you're like, how is this even possible? It shouldn't have been. It was an unsafe basketball hoop. But so I was guarding to block this layout right under the net, right? And I remember my finger came along and hit the post, supporting and I remember my finger was like bent this way. But I was a hardcore kid, right? You never showed it hurt. So I remember I just looked at it and went, pop. And I popped it back in. And I remember how much that hurt. And I was like, And I don't think I even said anything. I just went inside. Because that's when I'm like, and I start crying. But, you go to the nurse. But I relocated my own finger in the 4th grade. That's how hardcore things were back then. That was the same year I think I discovered Crystal Castles. It was around that same time. That was gifted. That was gifted program at that point. Yeah. Ghetto gifted school. And I know you're not supposed to use ghetto anymore, but that's where we both said, that's what we said back then. Ghetto gifted was a pretty hardcore place. So I say this just to say I am no shrinking violet. I am not a think of the children when it comes to roughhousing, but I know what I saw in that ad. And okay, I accept because it wasn't clear. Different people saw different things, but there is a difference. There is a difference between innocent roughhousing and actually hurting another kid. And part of childhood development is teaching kids the difference. Because we can't deal with it the way we did back in the day, which if you got too rough too often with another kid, that kid slugged you. And you learned that way that you pushed it too hard. But somebody else, and this is a longtime commenter, and so, when somebody's cool commenting, I listen to them more, but I think I actually did say something about this thing. It was part of no, I didn't specifically say this because I was focusing on the right way, and I bundled it together in my head, but they're right that this is the men need to hold other men accountable. And I talked about this on Twitter, but I didn't talk it in the video, and so I'll leave that there. People need to hold other people accountable. It is not a male-male thing. It is not a male-female thing. It is not a female-female thing. A huge perpetuation of benevolent sexism is done by women to men. Women are only half a point different than men on the ambivalent sexism scale. Hostile sexism, there's a big difference. There's like a 3-point difference between men and women regarding hostile sexism, that I hate blank thing. Men are much more likely to engage in that kind of thing than women. Benevolent sexism, only a half a point difference on average. And so women are, I'm going to say equal, because half a point, not statistically significant. Women are just as culpable as men for perpetuating benevolent sexism, which is insidious. I prefer to call it insidious sexism, but if you look it up, it's benevolent sexism, which is why I give you the term. But that means that a lot of these boys will be boys, men are strong, women are kind stereotypes are perpetuated by women just as much as men, or almost as much as men. And this is one of those things that we are not dealing with effectively, because most anti-sexism messages deal with just hostile sexism and benevolent sexism. That shit is insidious. And I took issue as well with the men need to hold other men accountable thing, because that implies that women are not empowered enough by society for us to hold men accountable. And I think that it should be everybody holding everyone accountable. And that's really difficult right now, because except in microcosm, we do not have agreed upon standards ahead of time. And this is why I'm a big fan of when I do my anti-bullying, anti-cyberbullying workshops, which I haven't done in a long time because I learned the hard way. Teenagers just don't want to hear it. And so I stopped doing them. It's like, let them freaking learn. Then, we discovered the suicide attempt rate in girls is shooting up because of social media crap. But one of the things I talked about is a principle of persuasion is consistency. So you get everybody at the beginning of your cycle, whether it be a term, whether it be a semester, whether it be your year, the group decides for the group what agreed upon codes of conduct will be. And everybody signs this agreement. So they decide for themselves what works for them. They do not have rules enforced upon them. They come up with it themselves. Everybody agrees to it. There is a debate period where people are encouraged to dissent. Get it out now. People lead by example and go, I'm going to question this part of it. And then other people feel, and then everybody signs it at the end because everybody is agreeing to it. Everybody is opting in. There's a buy-in. This works great with team management. If you just give people orders, they nod and they don't feel bought in. They feel like it's forced on them. But if they're part of the process, they're not going to get everything they want, but they get something they want. And so they feel an investment in that. And once they've agreed to it, human beings want to be consistent. It is a huge part of our internal sense of self. So they're less likely to go against that social code because they help develop it. It works really, really well. The problem is we can't do that on the internet. Except here. I think that's one of the reasons our comment section works so well is I hear you guys and we have a feedback process and we sort of came up with what we're cool with sort of collectively. You guys, are empowered to offer suggestions and say if something's not working for you, say if you prefer something would work better. And so it self-enforces because everybody feels heard. And I really don't like this men need to hold other men accountable messaging. I know where it came from. I'll spare you the history. But I think I see the wisdom of it in the short term. It comes from the anti-violence against women stuff in the 90s. If anyone is interested, I'll leave it there. If you're really interested in more, I can talk about it more. Leave a comment and say you're interested there. The men need to hold men accountable thing, I think, is a bit out of date now because there's a lot of mixed gender stuff now. And I don't like anything that unnaturally separates the sexes. I think that, women, we are quite capable, at least the circles I run in, of holding men accountable. Sure, peers should hold peers accountable, I think is a better term. Some men are more comfortable talking about sensitive stuff with other men. Some men aren't. Some men are more comfortable talking to women about things. Every individual is different. Women are the same. You know, non-gender conforming people are the same. Trans people are the same. Everybody's different in what they feel more comfortable with. And I don't think that people should be forced into these gendered norms in terms of social interaction. Friends should hold friends accountable, right? You shouldn't stop someone on the street, but if your buddy, if you know both people involved and a guy's being too pushy, yeah, step in because you know both people involved, right? If you can talk to somebody, I tend to try to talk to somebody and say, are you okay with this before I intervene? Because I don't want to speak for someone else. Sometimes all you need to do is, instead of that, you know, hey, not cool that they showed, I find the approach that works better is everything okay here? Because then the woman has, in this case, the woman, because I'm basing it on the paradigm of the ad, has the opportunity to not embarrass the guy if she's not comfortable with that. But what it does is, yeah, it's okay. And then it gives her an ability to duck out, right? You've cooled the momentum of the whole thing. And you could tell when somebody's like, yeah, okay. And no, it's okay. It's fine. You know the difference. I find that works a lot better than, hey man, not cool. Like, I think we do. And I understand that some circumstances there is too much nuance to put this in a commercial. Let's just say that. But I did want to call attention to that because you're right. The men need to hold other men accountable thing is reductive and insufficient. And I guess it was just one of the lesser bad things in something where, like I said, the first 48 seconds were just a hot mess. But at least we got a chance to talk about it, right? And at least people felt heard, and at least people, and I, like, it's important for me to make it clear that in terms of that benevolent, aka insidious sexism, it's not just men perpetuating it. Women are almost just as likely to do it. And that's just fact. And we shouldn't be afraid of facts, because if we ignore these facts, we never actually solve the problem, right? Right. All right. Thanks for watching, and let me know about the lighting. All right. Have a great weekend, guys. See you back on Monday.